Hello and welcome to 100% Real with Ruby. Today I have, my goodness, it's been such a long while since I've actually had Jeremiah on, but I think one of our best podcasts was one that, well, our first one was very in depth on building muscle and building the physique and realizing the realities with that. But I feel like this one's going to be like that podcast on steroids and kind of touching on our last podcast that we also had Jeff Hain on, in that our training and how we train really freaking matters. No matter whether you're trying to lose fat or trying to build muscle, so many people miss the most important aspect with, if you're not trying to gain muscle, you need to fight to keep muscle because your body does not want that. So I guess the best way to address this podcast and to let Jeremiah bring himself into this is something we are both passionate about, is getting people kick-ass physiques through focusing on, number one, lifestyle elements, because that's the foundation. But number two, it's building. You build a physique. You don't break it down and you don't burn it down.
Mhm.
That's the part so many people miss when they are trying to build a physique. So with that, let's kind of introduce the podcast with that and why you feel that most people struggle in seeing the results they want despite working really damn hard.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, thank you for having me back. It's always great to be here. All right, so why most people struggle despite working so hard. I mean, I think that you really touched on this, but I really kind of like to explain this as there are almost two different levers we can use to change our physique, right? Fat loss lever, muscle growth lever. Now, most people, and we work with mostly women, so I'll keep most of this specifically women. Most women have just kind of pulled that fat loss lever over and over and over again. Like I was on a call right before this, just talking with the lady about coaching, and she talked about how, man, even like when I was at my leanest, when I was like below 20% body fat, I feel like I was still just like kind of quote unquote skinny fat, were her words. Now, in that instance, like that's such a great example of this, where oftentimes like people think, okay, the solution is I need to get leaner still. I need to push my body fat even lower and lower and lower. But and then like that kind of set point below which we will be in an unhealthy place hormonally, you will just feel like shit, is from a body fat perspective is going to be higher for women versus men. Like your essential levels of body fat are going to be higher. So we can only push that so far. And but it's also, again, like when we're looking at, okay, the physique that you want, it is very rarely, I kind of like to explain this as losing weight, losing body fat will kind of unveil a smaller version of the physique you already have, whereas building muscle kind of allows us to change the shape of our physique, right? And for most people, it is, okay, if we just created a smaller version of the physique you have still, would you be good with that? And typically it's no, I want more shape, more definition, which again is going to come from building muscle. So I really like to, and this is a huge part of what we focus on with the ladies we coach, is just helping people understand how much adding more muscle tissue will do to creating the physique you want, creating the shape you want. If you add more muscle, if you don't lose a single pound of fat, but you add 5 pounds of muscle, that ratio of fat mass to lean mass improves. Your body fat percentage will literally decrease. You'll look leaner still. And really, for so many people, that like more time focusing on fueling well, building muscle tissue is the biggest piece. Again, like just taking some time pulling that fat loss lever versus focusing, or excuse me, that muscle growth lever versus just focusing on fat loss. So kind of a high level. Again, I think people are typically just focused on the wrong thing, right? Where, like, if we look at the rate of fat loss, realistically, is pretty, depending on the person. In general, it's going to be relatively easy for us to lose a pound of fat in a week. Whereas if we look at the rate of muscle growth, gaining a pound of muscle in a month is incredible progress, right? That's much quicker than realistically most people past the beginner stage are going to be able to make progress. So within that, it's interesting how skewed that ratio is. Like you would think based on that, hey, we should probably spend at least a 4-to-1 ratio of time focusing on building and eating at least at maintenance and putting ourselves in a more optimal position to build versus in fat loss. Most people are like completely flipped on its head where it's like 95% of the time I'm focused on fat loss. And then that other tiny sliver of time, maybe I'm not in a deficit. Honestly, it's pretty rare people spend much time focusing on building in general, but that is just so flipped on its head. So high level, I would say that's the biggest thing holding people back. I'm happy to dig into whatever you want to from there.
I want to have a really deep debate around this because it's rife where people are, but I guess it's because social media is always showing us these people that are extremely lean, because we fill our feed with so many different people. We're seeing people in their leanest state, in their fittest state, but they're also probably 8-10 years down the road where they've already done the back work. Like,
Yeah.
most people that are following me now did not see me when I was 6 kilos heavier at the height of my longest build phase. That's 12 pounds for you Americans. But in my
Thank you.
longest building phase, which lasted 2-3 years. And I only really did one fat loss phase since then. And then I just kept leaning out while eating back up at maintenance, because it just, that maintenance ended up being like still a slight deficit that I didn't realize until later on anyway, but it completely changed my physique. And I can look at myself now and be like, my body hasn't changed. I look the exact same freaking thing as anything. And the funny thing is that I weigh about the same as well. But if you look at the photos, my muscle maturity, my muscle density, my physique is completely different. And when you actually see that put onto a female's body, even though like so many people putting out these messages aren't exactly women doing the thing. They're just preaching it without actually showing them do the work. And people like you put your clients through it, because obviously you're not a woman yourself, so it's hard to show it for yourself. But it's like, yeah, we can feel that. We can feel like women are different. We can feel like we're special snowflakes and we store fat around our stomachs and cortisol and hormones. But no, it's these mistakes people make to their approach to building muscle. And that's the conversation that I want to get into. But like you said, people keep pulling the fat loss lever, which should be the one that you pull in the smallest amount. Like that, the smallest percentage of your time should be on that lever. I can't even think of an analogy to put onto a car, because it's kind of like going in reverse. You don't really go in reverse all that much. I actually want to say reverse, because you're making progress driving forwards, which is building muscle either in maintenance or in a slight surplus, which if you want to go even further, that's when you actually start kicking up the gear into the slight surplus, and you're going to get to the destination faster. There's a good analogy. You're not making progress in fat loss. You're revealing progress. And the more that you put that thing into reverse, you could risk muscle loss, because you're going too fast, you're going too hard. If you're training in a suboptimal way, still doing 6-7 days of training, you're more likely to lose muscle. If you think you need to add in cardio or HIIT, you're more likely to lose muscle, because you're not having the recovery capacity to do it. Your training performance, training volume, training intensity has now gone down because you're fatigued and you're not performing at that same level. But that was a roundabout way to try to come to this. It's people lose weight and then they stick to that, like you said. They stick to that, whether it's the calories, whether it's the ideal, whether it's buying skinny clothes for their skinniest self. They stick to that thinking that that's what worked. That's what they need to keep doing until it backfires. You can't maintain it. You can't fit it into your life. You freak out. So then you pull your calories back, and you're not educated around the fact that that isn't where you're meant to be. It's the lack of education around that. So then when you do splurge, you do break out, you go back into that restriction. But what do you end up with? You end up with a body that is softer, and you end up more unhappy, more disappointed, even though you thought that what you needed because your clothes were feeling tight. Well, and then come to doing it the right way. Okay, now you're doing it the right way. I'm getting to it. So you can go on your own monologue. I'm getting to it. But you're doing it the right way. You're training really hard. You're with a coach even. But then you freak out that your clothes are getting too tight. Or you freak out at the scale. Or you just feel bigger. Even the clothes are a subjective measure, because I can feel really tight in my clothes one day, and the day before I wasn't. And there was a case yesterday where I felt huge and watery, and that's because the gym was so stuffy. And it's like my body was probably holding a lot more water as well from that day. Like my body just felt like it was retaining a lot of water. If I was wearing normal clothes and not gym clothes, I probably would have felt like my clothes were tight. But because I don't wear restricted clothes, I never really have that issue. So I would look at your wardrobe. But this dieting for the next summer, the next event, not giving yourself enough time to build, only will end up making you look softer, blaming your coach, blaming your program. But really, it was you that wanted to jump back into a fat loss phase when you weren't ready, and you did not acknowledge that fact. So I'm going to let you take that as one mistake that people make, and then other mistakes people make when trying to build muscle, feeling like they only just get fluffy.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, I think next from that perspective would be, I made a reel about this yesterday, and I'm not sure actually what your opinion on this will be, but I think that a lot of people jump into like a quote unquote bulk way too quickly. And really the biggest thing is to build muscle. Okay, to build muscle tissue, we need the proper stimulus. So what does that stimulus entail? Okay, we need to take the target tissue, whatever we're trying to grow. Basically, we need to fatigue and stress the muscle fibers within that tissue to the point where they are very, very close to failure, right? So probably we need to be able to get to within a rep or two shy of fail for that set to really be effective. Now, there's a lot that goes into that, right? We could look at like from an exercise selection perspective. This varies by person, right? Like you, Ruby, I think you're a pretty good barbell squatter, if I'm right. I'm a terrible barbell squatter. Every time I try to barbell squat, it is not like my quads are like, holy shit, my quads are so close to failing, I have to stop. Or my glutes, it's like my back hurts and my hip shift is like coming back and I forgot about this, right? So for me, I like a hack squat or a pendulum squat better because that stability allows me to really just, okay, my quads are the thing that's actually failing. My quads are the limiting factor here, right? But then alongside that, the actual training effort is so important. And this is none of this is like anyone's fault, where it's a lot of people just haven't been educated on it, right? A lot of people, like there's the older generation in the US at least, like there's like we're like in a retirement community right now, and there's like a bunch of old ladies who like walking around with like the little tiny pink dumbbells, just like walking and doing like dumbbell presses and bicep curls, and it's adorable, but it's like, hey, I don't know what we're getting out of this. Anyways, point of all that being, the proximity to failure is so important, right? And part of that ties into the exercise selection, but really a lot of people just have never been shown how hard we actually need to train and don't realize like how much more they're capable of. Where I think you were talking about the other day, actually, when it's like, okay, my coach prescribed me like 6 to 10 reps. Okay, I did 10 reps and I stopped. Where we don't need to focus on that as much. Kind of think of that as a rough guideline, but the most important thing is, were we within a few reps shy of failure? And was the target tissue we're trying to grow the actual thing that would cause us, or the actual thing that caused us to fail? Was that the limiting factor, right? So then within that, that's what we need for the actual stimulus for growth. So the problem is, a lot of people, when it comes to building muscle, think, okay, I've heard like I need to eat more food, and that's going to be like the key to building muscle. So like I'm going to do a bulk, right? And just, okay, I ramp my food way up. But a lot of times training just isn't what it actually needs to be to send the muscle growth signal. And that's the most important thing, where training is ultimately what we need to build muscle. It's of course more ideal. It's the least ideal condition for muscle growth is going to be when we're in a calorie deficit, but it's still very possible, right? As long as we have adequate nitrogen and then the stimulus from training. Maintenance going to be better. A slight surplus is going to be more ideal still. But none of that matters if we don't have the right stimulus in place. So a lot of times people will, okay, well, I haven't been building muscle, so I'm gonna enter a bulking phase and eat more food. And we'll like go into a pretty reasonable size calorie surplus. But if the training stimulus we need still isn't in place, probably just gonna result in more fat gain. So typically, like what I find, go ahead.
I just want to quickly add in, sometimes it's not even the idea of eating more food. It's just that as soon as people aren't attaching the fact that they are in a diet to their current situation, they feel like they are all of a sudden going to build muscle.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, that's so often it is, hey, actually the training is the biggest piece that we're missing. It is interesting how many clients will hop on board with us who think that the nutrition is the biggest missing piece. And as part of it, there's oftentimes a lot we can clean up with the way you're fueling yourself, your consistency. But there has been like 1 to 2 clients through the entirety of my time coaching that I brought on board where it's been truly been like a, wow, your training is just spot on. The effort is great. The execution is great. Where if the goal is to build muscle, which most people we work with it is, everyone we work with it is, that is such an important part of it. I again like to describe it as like that training is the gas pedal. To go with your car analogies, our nutrition is kind of the fuel in the tank, right? Where it's, okay, you weren't pushing the gas pedal before. Now we're just gonna like, okay, I'm entering a bulking phase, so I'm just gonna like overflow that fuel tank, but I'm still not pushing the gas pedal. Again, we're still not really gonna go anywhere. So that's really the biggest piece or one of the biggest mistakes I see is, again, just that misunderstanding around how important the training is, and even just doing the right modality, right? If it's like, hey, I'm cycling, I'm doing lots of HIIT, we're just not going to get the stimulus we need within that as well.
Something that just brought to mind is the other day I was waiting for the petrol prices to go down. I said, fuck it, I'm going to fill it up anyway because I was like that critically low that my light came on. But the thoughts that went through my head were, I need to really be careful with how I'm driving my car. I need to be careful with what I do with my time. I need to make sure that I don't book anything that requires me driving anywhere because
You don't want to run out of petrol.
yeah, it's like I'm thinking of anything to conserve this energy in the car. And that is how a lot of people subconsciously, like most of the time, you're not even conscious about this, but you are at times as well. It's a lot of people are subconsciously doing that in their training. They're not giving their best because their body isn't able to perform at their best. And then people wonder why their calorie deficit isn't working. It's because you've metabolically adapted yourself through your habits. Because metabolic adaptation doesn't really exist the way that most people think it does. It hardly ever adapts. The only way it adapts is through your habits, through your behaviors, through you being human, moving less, performing, underperforming, underfueling yourself. And this is why, to me, fueling is really freaking important for building muscle. But it's like your training is the most important factor. Your fuel will help you train harder. It will help you get that stimulus out. But there needs to be a foundation there first before we think about fuel, before we even think about putting you into a surplus. And I think that also freaks a lot of people out because it's like as soon as you put them onto like 1,800 calories when they came onto you from 1,500, they think they're in a surplus. It's like, no, you are just underfeeding yourself. You're not in a surplus yet. If you're gaining a lot of weight on 1,800 calories, it's not the calories that are doing that. There's things that we need to look at outside of that. Like, are you tracking everything? Is your movement where it should be? Are you being consistent? Are you tracking your oils, your condiments? Because I'm pretty sure you go through the same thing where you have this active woman who's doing a lot of work and then you put them onto 1,800 calories and they feel like they just gained all this fat overnight or in a few weeks. It's like, but you're in maintenance. You shouldn't be gaining all that much. And I just really wanted to touch on 3 more things so you can continue that conversation because I feel like it's really, you need to learn how to train hard. Yes, and that is going to take time. The biggest part is building up your training capacity because when you can do more work, you will also not build more. You will burn more in the gym, and then over time you will also build more because you have a greater capacity to do more and you're lifting more weights. But you mentioned the back squat part as well, and I feel like a lot of people don't match their reps properly to the particular exercises either because it's just like you're not going to do 20 reps on a back squat and take that to failure. Like I'm not going to do that. I can train, like I can literally, I did up until a couple of weeks ago because I'm trying to re-spark my drive for the squats again, but I'm deloading so that I can get that back again. But I can train my squats to legit failure. Like I will train it to the point where my body just will not squat up and I have to dump the bar. That is something I can't do that with a hack squat. I can't do that with a hack squat. It's a weird thing. I just can't. With a Smith machine, I can't do it either. I have figured out that I can do it with, I know I can do it with a leg press. I can do it with a pendulum squat, but with a hack squat and a Smith machine, I can't. Like, I just can't push myself to the same, limit that I would a back squat. I'm willing to fail a back squat. I have more confidence in that position. I don't know. It's weird.
That doesn't make sense to me. Interesting.
It's weird. Hack squats, I could never truly fail. Like, I would fail it, but it would be my mind, not my muscles. It's like I'm so emotionally bound up about this machine because I hate it so much. The pendulum is okay because I'm holding in front of me and it's not like behind me. I don't know. Maybe it's like a thing.
Have you had a bad experience failing on the hack squat in the past?
No, I've had a bad experience with higher reps and that didn't work. Okay.
Have you ever just like practiced failing with just like no weight, just like taking yourself through it and to see what it was like on the hack?
I failed on the hack squat, but that was because I couldn't mentally push myself through it. Like my legs were fine. But when it comes to the back squat, it's like I'm actually grinding the thing. I'm doing like an 8-second rep here, but with the hack squat, it's just like, nah.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of practice. I also think when you get close to failure, this is something I talk about with clients a lot, there is a it's almost like a safety thing where everyone will kind of like freak out, where your brain will kind of almost like set off an alarm where it's like, oh shit, like this is getting so hard, this is so heavy, I'm so tired. I try to like encourage clients. It's almost the same thing as like when someone has a hunger response or like tells you like, man, I was so hungry, and it's like, hey, let's actually dig into that, and like I want you to sit with what you were actually feeling there. Like, was it hunger, or was it like boredom or stress or something of the sort? Similar with like movements like that, a lot of times you will like get this ingrained like, this is so heavy, I'm so tired. And I encourage clients to like, okay, when those thoughts come up, I just want you to take a second, like don't acknowledge those, and think about what you actually feel. Like, do your legs actually burn that much? Are you actually that out of breath? Are you actually that tired? Because it pops up with me all the time too. And it's very interesting to like, oh wait, now that I think about it, like my legs don't actually hurt that bad. I'm not actually that tired. But it's again kind of like a panic response where I think as we get close to failure, until we get comfortable with it. And I mean, it makes sense because our body would sense like, hey, we're lifting a very heavy weight. I'm about at the point where I can't lift this anymore, like as a safety mechanism, and that makes sense. And I think again, just like taking time to get acquainted with that and like really being present with what you actually feel, it is very helpful there.
Yeah, I'm something I'm actually trialing this with, which I think is going to be really useful for the audience to take away as well. I suck at leg extensions. I
Okay.
hate feeling my legs burn, like my quads burn. I can take
Yeah.
any hamstring related to the point where I'm shaking so much that I just die out. But with my quads, I can't. So something that I try to challenge myself with is when I want to give up at that 12th rep, I just want to add one more. And like every single session, I just aim to add one more rep somewhere in the rep scheme, even if it's just on one set. And that's something that you can probably take with you as well. If you're so, like, if you're giving up because it's hard, because it's burning, it's acclimating yourself to that level of pain tolerance so that you can actually push through it. But
yeah.
like hamstring curls, fine. Leg extensions, I can't. It's so strange.
I think there's also just understanding like quad training is probably one of the most painful things. And there's just an element of, again, getting used to it. I think that's super normal, and probably everyone's experience the same. I don't know if personally I think hamstrings feel better, but quads are pretty rough.
Yeah, you just brought up a really good point there. And that's the thing. If you're not having these conversations with yourself where you're questioning your efforts, where you're questioning this type of stuff that Jeremiah and I are talking about, that is your sign that you aren't training to the level that you want to see results. Like, it should be at this level. And people then go say, oh, but it's so hard. There's so much to put into this. That's so much work, so much dedication. I can't give that. Look, maybe I would look at your training program. Do you have 8 freaking leg exercises on it? Is everything 4, 5, 6 sets? Are you giving yourself a chance to rest between the sets, to prep yourself for the workouts? Are you training 6, 7 days a week, not allowing yourself to actually recover? I find people struggle to push themselves in sessions, myself included when I used to do this, because all I could think about is I still have this whole session left to go. As if I'm going to keep doing that, I'm going to fizzle out. I still have every other day to go. And then it just becomes a resentment, and then you won't be training as hard. So that element plus everything else, but also the reps, the exercises, it's finding the right ones for you. So what you said, which I know you agree with as well, because you don't do it, deadlifts, I find like, yeah, I can grind a gnarly deadlift, but that shit is more of like, what's the word? It's more of a fatigue than it is a stimulus to me, because it takes up about half of my session and only really leaves me 2 exercises that I don't get to give as much quality to, because the deadlift just fatigued me that much.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that as a whole, we have found that like for clients, typically a lower volume approach is better. Now, that's not that I think that like lower volume is superior. I think that people are like a lot more resilient and recover from and handle a lot more than is generally put out there. But from a psychological perspective, if nothing else, I find we get like so much better results with like, hey, we're doing split squats. You only have 2 sets. We only have 2 sets to get this right, or 1 set. We better take it to the house and push this. And I think that is so much quicker of a way to get someone to the point where they're truly training hard enough versus, hey, we have 4 sets of your hack squat, 4 sets of your split squat, 4 sets of everything across the board, where it's people typically sandbag like at least 3 of those sets because it's like, damn, well, I still have another set after this. Like I think of a client I've been working with where recently she was like, hey, my split squats just aren't progressing. We were doing 3 sets. Can we add another set here? I want to push up the volume to get this to progress again. And we were every week having the conversation around like, hey, we're not pushing this hard enough yet. So then I was like, actually, we're gonna go the opposite direction. I'm gonna pull you down to 2 sets. So we better push this hard because we only have 2 sets now. I know you still have more in the tank though. And then suddenly her split squat started progressing again. And again, that's not like there's anything magic about lower volume aside from the psychological component where I think it's just a lot easier for, hey, I just have 2 sets here. Okay, 1, it doesn't seem like we have the luxury of wasted sets. And then also it's just mentally easier to manage, right? Where, oh yeah, I can do that. I can go hard on that first set or 2 sets, and then I can move on to the next thing. So I find in general, again, I don't think if we match effort, that a lower volume approach would be better than a higher volume approach. But for a large amount of the clients we work with, it does seem to work much better from the psychological component.
Yeah, I have like clients that usually start off on like, for example, 4 sets because I know that they don't train hard enough. They don't do warm-up sets and working sets. But just because you get more advanced doesn't mean you need more volume. I find that as they get more advanced, that is when I titrate down their sets because now they're able to give a higher force to it as well. So it's like as soon as you start learning how to train, you get more out of less. It's kind of like an inverted U where it's just like you start off with a little bit more and then you reduce it as I think it's that way. No, you start off with really little volume because you're like, you adapt to anything, you get really sore. And then you start to add the volume, and then you start to reduce it as your advancedness advances. But something you said there really reminded me of something Steve Hall said, which I wanted to find and pull it up. But it was something around the fact that, yes, it is shown in research something about higher, let's just say volume. Where is it? No, I can't find it, but it was something around the lines of, yeah, it is shown in research that more volume can lead to more growth. But the thing is, most people don't make more volume mean more volume. It's figuring out what works for you, where you can give your best intensity. And just because you can do more volume doesn't mean that you should. What can you recover from? How can you progress from there? And if you're making a lot of progress on less volume, why add in more? Why add in more fatigue?
Yeah, I think that's another big mistake a lot of people make is typically when something is going very well, that's when it's for some, and I have the same thing. I don't know what it is, but when things are going well and it's like, wow, I'm making the best progress I've made in a long time. What could I dial in a little bit further? What could I change to make this even quicker? And that is such a common form of self-sabotage. I don't know if I have much more to add outside of that, but I agree. And I think that to what you were saying, like from Steve's point, a lot of people are doing a lot of volume, but it's almost all junk volume, right? Where again, if we cut that in half, and that still is junk volume, still is fatigue that we have to recover from, even if it's not productive for stimulating muscle growth, junk volume. So again, if we like do a set of 20 and that stops with like 5 reps left in the tank, probably not doing a whole lot at all to stimulate muscle growth, but it still is fatigue we have to recover from. So again, like if we can, hey, we cut the amount of sets you're doing in half, but they're all very stimulative sets, all very close to failure. We both have better recovery capacity and we're getting a lot more stimulus. So it's a win-win. But yeah, I don't really have anything else to add there.
I'm going to say the same thing there because people do the exact same thing with their food and their diets. Things are going well. Oh, let's just cut calories more to make it even faster. Oh, let's just add in more of this to make it even faster. It's like, no, that is the worst thing you can do because you're just going to bottleneck yourself quicker and burn out quicker and sabotage quicker, and it's going to rebound. But I wanted to bring in an element of our last podcast before I move on to the next section of this one. And that's when we were talking about RDLs, hip thrusts, leg curls, all that kind of stuff. I personally think hip thrusts are really overrated. I don't know whether you agree, but I think they like hip thrusts and kickbacks are overrated. People put too much emphasis in the shortened ranges of motion because they feel it more. I had someone say to me, oh, I'm doing kickbacks and leg presses and what else was that? Leg presses, deadlifts, and squats and I'm doing kickbacks and I'm seeing a lot of progress there, I'm like, I wouldn't say the kickbacks are the reason you're getting a lot of progress there. Oh, and she added on, I feel kickbacks the most out of all of this, so they're the best thing I do. I'm like, I would argue the opposite in that they hardly do shit for you. Like, I don't know. Like, I had this conversation with someone before, and I'm getting into the podcast later, but it's just like people do this banded crap with their glutes, with this like external rotation, this cable stuff, and they do so many things that you can't load sufficiently to make a sufficient metabolic stimulus to demand that muscle to grow. Like, yeah, okay, cool, you feel it, and you might be getting the upper glute fiber that's just like sitting right at the top of the pelvis, but it's like you can't separate all the different fibers of the glute. Training them really damn heavy is going to recruit all of the fibers. It's not like your upper glutes completely switch off when you're doing leg presses, when you're doing split squats, when you're doing lunges, when you're doing Bulgarians. Single leg movements are like the goat for full glute development to add in, if anything. And you can load the shit out of them. Like single leg exercises, I don't mean single leg kickbacks. I mean like Smith machine split squats. I mean single leg presses, walking lunges, if you can balance. Like these exercises do a lot more for you than a cable kickback. But it's like that doesn't deem hip thrusts ineffective. It's just they should be the icing on the cake, like the least one used. That's my view on it. I don't know about you or Natalie or Andrea, but
yeah, no, I fully agree with that. I think we're all on board with that. So a movement that is more short and overload. So when a muscle is most challenged in the contracted position, that you will almost always quote unquote feel a muscle more when it is being challenged most in this short position. That's because when it's really overloaded during that contraction. So think like again at the top of a hip thrust, at the top of a leg extension, that's typically going to be a more short overload movement. And again, that's just largely due to when we're contracting, that's when it's challenged the most. But the sensation doesn't equal tension is the most important thing, right? And it's that significant tension that, hey, we need to actually take this tissue very close to failure. That's going to be one of the most important bars for growth. And then also, again, like really challenging things in the lengthened range. So when the muscle is more stretched is also very likely going to be more stimulative for growth as a whole. So like if we look at the raw stimulus we get per set, a movement like a leg press or a single leg or like a Smith machine split squat, like you referenced, where we're probably going to challenge that glute a lot more in the lengthened range. It's going to be hard at the bottom, easier at the top. We might not feel that like burning sensation in our glutes quite as much, but we are going to get a lot more overall significant tension in that lengthened position. So probably going to be more effective for growth. But and again, I think that it's now, as you said, like there's still merit to, I for sure think that like those short overload movements like hip thrust, kickbacks, there's still merit to them. They still provide stimulus. And a lot of times we're looking at like how specific is an exercise when we're getting into managing fatigue within a program and what specific areas we want to add more volume to and grow, right? So like our rear foot elevated split squats, our leg presses, our hack squats, things of that nature, kind of like a hammer almost, where we're just taking that and smashing everything. Whereas, I don't know, your hip thrusts are almost like a shit. I don't know what's smaller than that. That's kind of like a sledgehammer versus, let's say, a paintbrush. Okay, like, let's go with that.
It's an amplifier.
Okay, yeah, there we go. Something more similar to that, where okay, maybe at the start we do want, or we might put those short overload movements first, actually. But when we're looking at like the total amount of volume you want to apply to your lower body, hey, maybe we want to get some stimulus for the quads. Maybe this is a client who like quads growth isn't really much of a priority, but we're really much more focused on the posterior. Or hey, we've already done like a Smith machine split squat. We've already done an RDL, and we're to the point now where doing another compound movement, we probably wouldn't get as much out of that as we wanted. We'd incorporate a lot more fatigue, but we still want to give them a little bit more volume stimulus for their glutes. And that's where those more specific, hey, we're working less overall tissues. Maybe it's more like shortened overload. So not as much stimulus, but again, we can apply more volume to that specific tissue. There's still for sure merit to them. But no, I would agree, like they're not the most important aspect. And also from the tension or from the like, I feel it more perspective, again, that doesn't necessarily mean it's productive for growth at all, right? It could just be like metabolite buildup. It could be like instability is one of the things that will cause us to get a much more, with like less stable movements, we'll oftentimes get a much greater sensation in the muscle. But again, that doesn't make it better for muscle growth. Like if you do have you ever done like a medicine ball push-up where you're squeezing the medicine ball and like doing a push-up on the
You
medicine ball?
really, your chest and your triceps really feel that one.
Yeah, it feels crazy, but would that be a good, do you think that's going to be like a good hypertrophy movement?
The worst, because I can only get like half compared to my normal
Right,
push-ups.
right. It's a terrible hypertrophy movement, but you feel your pecs like crazy. But again, it's more so that instability aspect
But how
is
about
going
the
to be something.
that stupid thing? It's just like, that's doing nothing for you,
The
bro.
what?
The one, do you not know that
The
this
squeeze
event?
press?
Yeah, the squeeze press, if that's what you call it. Where they're
Yeah.
like on the bench and they're holding a plate like this. It's like, what are you training?
No, very, very similar. Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
This is going to lead into the next topic really well, but I just wanted to reiterate, that's the exact reason I would use a hip thrust. I would use a glute hyperextension, and especially like if you're doing 3 days, like my 3 day a week girls would not be doing those movements because we only have so many days to play with. If you've got 5 days with me, then I have more flexibility. Well,
Right.
4-5 days have more flexibility. I typically like the 4-day split more than anything. I know you do too, so I don't
Same,
need
yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, that's typically the reason I do that. And I also find that if I do something like a staggered stance hip thrust, it really teaches the client to engage the core and keep the pelvis aligned. So that's another reason I like the hip thrust, doing like a B stance hip thrust, or
Okay.
really just teaching them how to engage the core at the same time as the glutes, because many of them just do like a duck bum, like they're hip thrusting, but they just duck bum like that instead of actually hip thrusting. If you're watching
Okay.
the video, you would see that. But just kind of like, so then press and banded kickbacks and doing superseti stuff, having all these exercises, feeling like you worked really hard and not seeing results. The next topic, why most online, like even some of the really effective ones that prioritize lifting heavy, so whether they're good or not, why most online programs aren't effective for you. And by that, I mean like you just buy the program and follow the program, not like a coaching program, why those aren't really effective. And then why having a coach is so freaking important. I should say fucking important, because it's that important for this phase, especially because of our cognitive distortions that go into building muscle.
Yeah, absolutely. So why most online programs, like just buying a program online, you're saying isn't typically effective?
Yeah, because they're typically the ones that either change every 4 weeks, or people say that they're working really hard and not seeing results, or they just cycle through programs and still don't feel like they're getting anywhere.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest elements of that, again, comes down to the effort side of things, where one of the biggest things that we do with clients is we actually look at everyone's logbooks every week. How are things progressing? Does it look like we're sandbagging here? And we look at their training videos every weekend. Are we actually getting that proximity to failure we need? Alongside that, like, are you executing this well? And is this movement actually a good fit for you? Again, like it appears that a hack squat would be a great movement for me, but a terrible movement for Ruby, right? And is even like a psychological component to that. There's also going to be, what are your limb lengths like? Again, that's really going to be a large factor here. And even like, are we setting this up properly, right? From like your hack squat, are your feet too high to where your butt is rounding off to like you get a decent range of motion, and we're really not getting much knee flexion at all. We're getting a lot of hip flexion here. I honestly think that aspect of it is huge. Really, from a programming perspective, a lot of things can work very well as long as the effort and decent execution is there. But the effort, I think, is one thing that almost everyone needs to be coached through. And that's what, even like in my work with Brandon DeCruz, I know you know Brandon, where there was, man, like the first year of our work together, even, and I've been training for a long time. There was still almost every week, like, dude, you still got a lot more in the tank there. You could push harder, you could push harder. So you're not alone in this. But I think that, again, like that, helping people understand what hard training really looks like is so important. But then also, I think that so many, and again, there are for sure good like online programs out there as well. But I think so many that I have seen with like clients starting from whatever like PDF that I bought, it's just like so much volume, and like I'm training 5-6 days a week because it's like, and again, like for most people, it's quality over quantity is the most important thing. And it seems like a lot of times it's the idea of, oh, I bought this program and look at like how much I have to do and like, oh, this is really going to kick my ass. I think that's appealing, but it's not actually what people need in order to grow. It's balancing the stimulus with the recovery. And that's another aspect of it as well, right? There where your training and your nutrition need to kind of be working in synergy depending on where we're at, right? If we're in a place where, hey, you're trying to diet down, you're trying to like lose fat aggressively, but also you just bought this super high volume program that's going to have you doing like 30 sets of glutes a week, and you're just crushing yourself in the gym, and we're also in a steep deficit, like those two things don't match up very well, right? We need to make those things work synergistically where the fuel to a degree matches the demand and we can recover from what we're doing within our training. So do we need to, like, we might need to pull back volume or intensifiers within our training, or make sure we add in more food so you can actually recover from that. And that's, I think, one of the biggest mistakes is just those two things often don't align, where I mean, it's very rare that we take on a client anymore that's not working with us in both the training and nutrition capacity, because again, like those things just need to work together and are such a big part of the results. I forgot what the second part of the question was.
I'm going to add something to the second part now because it is really important. Like, because we are the ones that sabotage ourselves. It's not even just with how we feel in our bodies, not just how we do our nutrition, but we do sabotage ourselves with our training as well. And I know I spoke about this in my podcast with Brandon, which came out a few episodes ago. If you go listen to that, is like people just add on more drop sets because they don't feel like they worked hard enough, or they probably fell short of what they expected in a set. So they try to make up for it by doing more, which is like, I actually entered into this the opposite as you. I was someone who used to go balls to the wall because I was brought up training around guys, and they used to force me to do like the eccentrics only, where they're like, they push it up and like, nope, you're controlling it, and they like yell at me until I like failed it. So that's kind of where I started, and I did that for like a year, and my muscle growth in the first year was amazing. Like I put on about, but I was really small, I put on like pounds, probably like 20 pounds, but I was tiny. And the only reason that I probably went backwards was because then I fell into the competing route, lost a lot of muscle because I was just dieting. And this is a thing where it's just like, as soon as you get results once, it's really hard to detach yourself from the lean. And that's why I am so fucking passionate about what I do. But the second part of the question was how we sabotage ourselves. There's that self-sabotage that Jeremiah already mentioned, but then we feel like if we're not in fat loss, we're not making progress. Whereas with fat loss, you got a lot more tangibles. It's so much easier to dig into the mental side, knowing that you're seeing that progress, seeing the tangible results. But with maintenance and with building, you don't get that same dopamine response. And I feel like that's the hardest thing, yet people don't see coaches as valuable for this part. So I want you to talk a little bit more about why coaches are so valuable for the whole aspect of physique transformation.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, your physique changes the most in the building phases, as you said. And again, we can definitely build muscle in a deficit. Still very realistic. Body recomposition is very doable. Unless you've already built a lot of muscle, I think most people are capable of decent body recomposition, but we'll change our physique the most when we're building the most muscle, which happens outside of the fat loss phases. And again, most people, when they start coaching, haven't built nearly as much muscle as they want. A lot of people come to a coach already having successfully dieted, but it's either maintaining that fat loss and or building the muscle that they want are the things that they're missing. So, I mean, I think it's really pretty intuitive if you think about it. But a lot of times it's on the same token, it's very easy to, well, like I might just want to work with a coach for fat loss. And then as soon as that's done, cool, I'll like take it on my own from there. And again, it's not that that's necessarily a bad thing, but if you are someone who struggled to maintain, I think a lot of times people a lot of people are stuck in that cycle, and I was here myself for a long time, so it's definitely like no shame in this, but can get stuck in a cycle of I will like diet super aggressively for 12 to 16 weeks, and then I go back to basically how I was eating before, and I gain it all back, and I'm gonna hop into another diet, right? Where it's like, hey, 3 to 4 weeks after the last diet, we're gonna hop back into the next diet. And I almost compare this to, okay, let's imagine that 4 or 5 times a year you had to go on this super extreme restrictive budget because if you didn't do that, you wouldn't be able to cover your expenses for the rest of the year because you spend so much money, right? Well, the problem might not be fixed with the way you're approaching like those extreme budgeting times, but how you're spending the money the rest of the time. And that's probably the thing we need to work on and focus on. Same thing with maintenance phases and really mastering that skill of maintenance, where that is oftentimes one of the habits, or it is very much a skill. Like just like dieting is something that with practice we get better at. Maintenance is as well. And again, a lot of people will start working with a coach with fat loss goals, having been to or close to that point, like their fat loss goal previously, but again, maintaining it was the biggest struggle. So we have to not see just the fat loss phase at the end point, but also, hey, maintaining this and like that lifestyle integration aspect where we're actually turning this into something you can maintain long term and practicing those skills and habits of like working in meals out, more dietary flexibility, while still maintaining this. That is oftentimes the thing that people need to be coached through the most, but it's not as sexy because we don't see like as much tangible progress every week as we do like in a fat loss phase where we can like look at the scale dropping every week. But it's absolutely, I think, probably the most important phase to be coached through, and really as coaches how we help our clients the most.
Yeah, and as soon as people start to understand that it's in this phase that everything matters so much more, because you can lose fat any way, any approach. Even though I will argue doing it the smart way is the best way to do it, because that's what sets you up for a better physique versus just looking like a melted jelly flop. I was going to say melted candle, but it's more like jelly because a melted candle is just melted on the outside, and jelly just wiggles all over. And it's kind of where a lot of people, like you said at the very start of this conversation, bringing back to the beginning, this is exactly where I get a lot of people coming to me say the same thing too. I've lost a lot of weight before in the past. I was still never happy. Two of my most successful clients came to me from just me commenting on something that they said once, because they showed a lot of photos of them losing weight, and there's so many weight loss transformations of them, but they still don't look the way that they want. They still don't look like they have this physique that they want. If anything, they look softer. They look like they don't have shape. And it's just like, you don't want to be another weight loss transformation. You want to be a forever masterpiece in progress, which is exactly what this is. Like, you have a coach right now. You've had a coach through all of this to, like, it's not like, okay, cool, I lost weight, I don't need you anymore. Or cool, I'm getting married now. Life is too busy, I don't need you anymore. It's like, that's what a coach is for. It's for helping you still find ways to progress, maintain, navigate the self-sabotage that goes on in our heads through that process. And there's so much more to the goal physique than just fat loss. And like we said, fat loss is the smallest part of it all. And to sum this up, what exactly is the importance of tracking your intake, of making it quantitative, of logging your food, and of doing like the other smaller stuff that people just deem as not as important? But why is tracking your food so important, especially in these phases too? But also check-ins. I said also way too often then, but like checking in with your coach, being accountable to yourself, and tracking your food. Why are they so important?
Yeah. I mean, tracking your food, as you said, it's really just a way to quantify what's coming in. And it's, again, there's no right or wrong. For some people, it's just not their cup of tea. And if you are making great progress and you're not tracking and you're happy with how things are going, then that's perfectly fine, right? There's no matter what, like ultimately it's your decision. But I've had a lot of people that are stuck in this place where it is I'm so frustrated with where I'm at. I feel like I eat healthy, I eat clean, and I'm still not seeing changes. And that's, again, like sometimes it's not, well, the quality of your food is very important. The quantity is also important, right? And tracking our food is just the easiest way to track the quantity that's coming in and actually have a very subjective way to, okay, if basically we can just make this a science, right? Where rather than a guessing game, it's suddenly a science where, okay, I want to lose about a pound of fat this week. If I'm clear on what my maintenance is, well, this might not be perfect, but I can have a pretty damn good guess of, okay, I need to drop this many calories per day. And if I just hit these targets, I should lose about a pound of fat this week. There's such a beauty to that, just taking the guessing side of things out of it. But it is something that I think that a lot of times people think of tracking as being something that is too restrictive, when a lot of times it's like, man, I've been stuck in this place for like 5, 10 years where I really don't feel the way I want to. And like the simple act of tracking your food could be one of the biggest things that changes it. Now, I also think people look at tracking as very restrictive when they haven't really been given a realistic picture of like what getting to and maintaining the physique you want long term looks like. And it's like I'm just playing macro Tetris all the time. I just kind of eat at random throughout the day. And that's where, again, I think honestly, like a hybrid of like tracking and meal plans is very helpful with helping someone create more structure around, okay, and what does this actually look like to hit these macros on a day to day? Because the reality is, I'm sure, Ruby, for you, probably 80 to 90% of your meals throughout the week are very similar from like one week to the next, right?
Yeah.
Right. And that's, again,
I highly track for that reason.
right. And that's exactly the point where a lot of times it's, hey, just copy and paste and cool. If I'm going to go out to dinner tonight, maybe I do need to take a little bit more time to track this food. But honestly, it's something that should be very simple and not very time consuming at all if we have structure to our nutrition throughout the week and like an easy template we can follow. Again, I like talk a lot about like the flexible meal plan type of thing that we use with a lot of our clients where we kind of combine the two. But that makes it so much easier. And again, it just gives us more quantifiable. It gives us a very objective. I think it's said subjective before when I meant objective. It gives us very objective data to adjust depending on if we're making progress or not. What was the other question?
That's actually really important too, because so many people, that's what we said at the beginning of the podcast, where people say that they feel like they only just gain fat and not building muscle. And that's because you let yourself get too flexible in this approach, where it's just like when you finish dieting, you want to still have a lot of parameters around you until you get yourself into the momentum of maintenance, and then you can start to loosen up on the rigidity. Because if you go from dieting into I can eat all the foods, you're going to overeat because your body is still in this state where it was just like, I'm hungry, I want more food. And then you have highly palatable things. Of course, your body is going to want more. You're not going to have the same satiety signals for a little bit longer. And then you can start to transition into these things. But the other part of it was why checking in is so important.
Oh, yeah. So if you're working with a coach and checking in, I really kind of just look at this as like the first domino that tips over all the other dominoes, where I can just say consistently, it's kind of like the how you do one thing is, I think it's really as a whole just a good microcosm of how much of a priority you're making this aspect of your life, right? And I don't think that like everyone has the same 24 hours in the day or anything of the sort, right? It's a lot different with you're a busy mom and I just have a dog and that's it. But there is that element of, I'm sure you know who Jackson Pios is, right?
Yeah.
I've heard him say, this is from him, so got to give credit to him for that. But if it's like, hey, if you are caught up, okay, let's say you have your favorite show or your favorite two shows, you watch, and those come in out of like Tuesday night at 7 p.m. and Wednesday night at 7 p.m. And no matter what, we don't miss those. Okay, then we can probably make sure like check-ins are Monday at 8 a.m. If that is just as much of a priority as those things, we can make sure we're making that happen as well. Really, what I see is like the check-in can seem like something insignificant if it's like, I just really don't have that much to update my coach on. But that touch point and as a whole, just treating that as a priority is such an important part of just signaling to yourself as much as anything else that this is still a big priority to you. Remaining accountable, I think, is another huge element of that. But also as coaches, especially because we don't see you in person, without that data, we are basically just throwing shit at the wall and hoping something sticks, right? Similarly, if you like fill out a check-in and then it's just like as little as you could information as you could possibly give in a check-in, it's kind of like I don't know, imagine that your significant other came home and they were upset, or imagine actually texting your significant other and they were upset, but they were only giving you like K as a response, or like they were only giving you emojis as a response. It's kind of like trying to work through that, right? Where it's like, okay, we can't really help here. Not that like my wife is the sweetest person in the world, would never do that, but like as an example,
it's the metaphorical K message.
Yeah, exactly. Where it's like, hey, there's really nothing we can do here. Where the better you can communicate, the more with us we can share, the more we can help, right? But it's always clients who are the best communicators are always the ones that get the best results, because that communication, the collaboration is such a big part of coaching. Where really, it's as simple as if you just commit to consistently communicating with your coach, not just what's going well, but what you're struggling with. I've never had a client do that who didn't do incredibly well, right? But it's being willing to talk through those things that's really going to make or break your progress.
Yeah, all of that, honestly. Like, if you're going really well, the thing that I really encourage you to do, and something that I love it when my clients do, is just celebrate what you did well. Like, actually mention what went well in your performance, because that's my favorite part of check-ins, seeing where you excelled in your training, what you felt more, what went up in lifts. Those are the things that are going to drive physique, that are going to drive your actual life and enjoyment of the process, because that enjoyment comes from doing the things, it comes from challenging yourself. So the more that you can put your eggs into that basket of noting your performance and how your body feels and celebrating all of that, the further along you'll get. So with that, I think this brings this podcast to a really good close. And it didn't really touch on all of the cognitive distortions that come from building, but Brandon and I spoke about that in our last podcast, so make sure you go back to that one. Otherwise, you heard it again, and I hope that it sinks in the importance of training in a conducive way, because just training hard or just lifting heavy doesn't mean you're going to get results. It needs to be specific. It needs to be on a SMART program, because you can feel like something's really hard and feel like something's really heavy, but it still not be conducive to your goals. How can you tie that up and put a bow on that?
I don't know if I can tie that up any better than you did, honestly. I think we really hit the nail on the head here.
Yeah, train smart, not just.
Just really quality over quantity, I think, is the biggest thing to focus on when it comes to your training.
Yeah, and specific for you, because it's like the metaphorical, I just eat healthy, but I can't lose weight. I just lift heavy, but I can't gain muscle. What are you doing?